Thank you, everyone, for tuning in for our third class of our Synchronous overview. I appreciate you being patient since we are unable to meet together virtually live. I wanted to make certain I pre-recorded my presentation for you for your viewing. So as we would enter together, I'd like you to take a moment, and as you review this graphic of an iceberg, we may have seen this iceberg represented in different variations, but in this figure, you'll see that success is the tip of the iceberg. That would be what people see. Under the iceberg are what really happens in order to see that success. So believing you can, practicing, developing new strategies, having that self-kindness, having failures, resilience, discipline and help from others, patience and rejections, and also focus are some of the attributes that we may embody before we reach quote unquote successful accomplishments and achievements of our dreams. I want you to just take a moment and think about how you, in your life, what really speaks to you? What in terms is not something what maybe people see, but what you know in your heart, in your being, that you know due to the fact that what you really did in order to achieve success. What has been helpful? For me, this is something that connects closely to self-determination and what we can use as we are developing our transition plans and looking to the end in mind. Stephen Covey in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People do very much highlight 7 habits, and one is keeping the end in mind, more or less like knowing where you're heading. There will be failures, there will be rejections, but knowing that we can overcome them. So I thought this was just a helpful graphic to remind us that, yes, success can be perhaps visible, maybe from what others can see. And it also connects that to me to the circles of influence or circles of support that that exercise we went through last week, that those who may not be in your close circle may only see your success, but those who are closer to you know the intimate details of how you reached your success. So for this evening, our objectives would be to describe the steps that should be taken to help connect individuals with developmental and other disabilities to adult residential services. We also would like to identify specific residential service providers within your local community. And part of your asynchronous work as well would be to collaborate with students and their families and helping them take the steps necessary to assist them in making the transition to their first home or apartment away from home. We will take a case from your course texts to imagine and walk through the steps using a student that is depicted in your course text. I'd like to also note that adult service system regarding the provision of community living and employment options for adults with disabilities who need support to live as independently as possible. So I just wanted to note that we're looking at that and finding ways to bridge from school to those possibilities in community living. So our agenda for this evening is to look at our community expectations. We're going to touch on what's called the culture of consent. We will have a discussion through Canvas since we are unable to meet face-to-face virtually. We'll complete our collaborative exercises on Canvas, and then we will have our closing time. And you can always reach out to me through my text or email. Our community expectations, and thank you always for being respectful towards each other, reflective in our work and what we do with our students as we are learning new content, being present in mind and body, and being prepared. So hopefully you are able to use your course text by now, The Essentials of Transition Planning. I'd like you now to take a moment, and if you have your notebook handy or something to write with, I'd like you to think about last week. We learned more about person-centered planning and how using a tool such as Circle of Support would be beneficial in the transition planning process. I'd like you to note for just a few moments of what stood out to you as most important. And you can tuck that away as we move ahead. So over the weeks, I have been including terminology. In other words, our own terminology word wall. I added for our class this evening the ARC self-determination scale, which is an evidence-based tool that has validity around it, where it assesses and analyzes most likely a person with developmental or intellectual disabilities for the degree of their autonomy, their self-realization, their psychological empowerment, and their degree of self-regulation. So this information is used to inform teams on how to best meet a certain individual. So, as we have discussed, self-determination is the theoretical construct of what we are looking at when we are developing our transition plans for our students. So I'm going to read from the screen and you can follow along with me about what indeed is an ARC self-determination scale. So in essence, it is a student self-report measure of self-determination designed primarily for use by and normed with adolescents with cognitive and developmental disabilities. The scale has two primary purposes. One, to provide students and educators a tool that assists them to identify students' strengths and areas of support and instructional need and self-determination. The second purpose is to provide a research tool to examine the relationship between and among self-determination and factors that promote or inhibit self-determined behavior. So this was used as a research tool. So the creators of the ARC self-determination scale wanted to make certain that that was noted. But the primary purpose is to be used as a tool to help them determine the strengths and needs of an individual with a disability and how we can best meet their needs. As we have learned in previous courses, that assessment should be used to inform our next steps. So this is a tool that has been proven helpful for educational teams and transition teams. All right, so as we delve deeper into the ARC self-determination scale, I am going to post a PDF of the ARC self-determination scale. So if we were in person, I would provide a laminated copy of this to you, but since we are in a digital platform and virtual, I will be posting it to Canvas, and I'd like you to take some time with it to carefully read and complete the portions about yourself. So similar to what we've done before, and this helps us just increase our level of empathy and metacognition of when we go through it ourselves, we have more of an understanding of what our students may or may not experience. So as you're looking through this, and as I mentioned at the beginning of our time, keeping the end in mind for a person with a disability, do you think that this is a valid instrument to use for your transition planning? So for this time, I'd like you to analyze and think critically of the tool and scale. And I'd like you to think if there is anything missing from the form that you think would be valuable for a transition team or for a person with a disability. So I'd like you to think about that. So remember, we want to make sure that it's truly assessing self-determination, like in choice making, decision making, problem solving, goal setting and attainment, self-observation, the internal locus of control, positive attributions of efficacy and outcome expectancy, self-awareness, and self-knowledge. So you'll be able to find that on your Canvas, and then you'll see that there's a portion of how you would respond in a discussion. All right, so we're going to move along. And I just want to see if I can show you the actual ARC. Had it up here. Okay, well, you'll be able to find that on Canvas. Okay. So as you reviewed your ARC, I just wanted to reiterate and define self-determination through another acronym, which oftentimes is referred to SCARF, which stands for support, confirmation, authority, responsibility, and freedom. As we discussed last week, we thought to ourselves, if autonomy was taken away from us or no longer was an aspect of our self-determination, we would feel helpless. We would feel trapped, limited. So we want to ensure that we are providing means to provide human rights, freedom of choice, independence for all, for those who have disabilities and those without disabilities. When we are developing our transition, some of the domains that we are addressing are employment and career development, post-secondary education training, independent living, community participation. We're also focusing on if transportation is needed. If we're looking at self-determination, if we find that there is a need for additional training or skill development, we're looking at that through the ARC, through tools such as the ARC self-determination scale, communication and social skills, how if by the need of through the needs of the certain individual, do they need assistive technology, and so forth. The health and well-being, relationships and social interactions, and of course safety measures, making certain that that is addressed, most importantly. Before we move on to time to actually delve deeper, I'd like you to take a look at this slide and take approximately 2 to 3 minutes to see if you can match the post-secondary domain or type of post-secondary goal, if you will, to the goal itself. So in other words, they're all mixed up and you're matching that. So for employment, you're going to find a goal that would be logical. And then we'll check together. Post-secondary education, independent living, and community participation, excuse me. So in my estimation, these 4 types of goals are the central types of post-secondary goals that we would develop for students. All right, so I'm showing you what it would be matched to. So an employment post-secondary goal would sound like, after high school, Austin will obtain full-time supported employment in a hospital setting. Post-secondary education goals would sound similar to, after high school, Ellen will attend the local community college full-time to obtain an associate's degree in business. Independent living post-secondary goal would sound similar to, after high school, Gareth will live in a college dorm or share an off-campus apartment with friends. And then finally, community participation post-secondary goals may sound like, after high school, Brianna will participate in a community bowling league once a week. Now, thinking back to our course related to IEP goal development and SMART goals, you may notice that these goals follow that similar framework: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and not quite timed oriented, but it is most likely annual for a transition team. Okay, so with that in mind, and in the background, so to speak, I'd like you to, for this time, meet Deepika. Her case is described on page 75 of your course text. I'd like you to think about how you would support Deepika in the person-centered transition process. I'd like you to answer these questions. What is the student's dream? What skills or behaviors does the student need to learn to attain this dream? To what locally available programs, services, and support should be made to support this dream of Topeka? And what responsibilities must education, adult services, student, and family team members assume to make this dream a reality? And it may very well be described in Topeka's case study. So I have posted an organizer available under Module 3 on Canvas. And this is a place where you can answer and record the aforementioned questions. Okay? And I'll have it all laid out. I will also post Topeka's case in case you do not, unfortunately, have the textbook available. So I'll also have that as a backup for you to review. All right. So that would be your collaboration. More content. The topic of consent is something that is complex in terms of independent living arrangements and community-based programs. I'd like you to think about, when was the last time you gave your consent? When was the last time you made a decision to not give your consent? What emotions did you experience? And did you feel empowered? And you may be wondering, okay, what does this have to do with self-determination? So consent is defined as permission for something to happen or an agreement to do something. We're giving our consent all day long, whether we have it consciously identified or unconsciously giving our consent. When we wake up, what we will wear, what we'll have for breakfast. If you go to work, we all have that choice. The temperature at which the house thermostat is set. Watching TV during breakfast, if that's your choice. What time you need to leave for work. So consent at times can be a synonymous with choice making. Okay, like whether you're going to do something or not. All right, and it's not even 9 a.m. and we make all these choices before 9 a.m., most of us. And then even the bigger picture consent. Where do you want to live? What do you want to do for work? Who do you want as friends? Who do you want to support you? What are your hopes? What are your goals? So similar to our discussion last week, we spoke about the autonomy and what if that was taken away? Whether we know it or not, we are individual human beings and we have that common core need of agency. But imagine if these were non-existent. And this often happens for those with developmental disabilities, as we've discussed previously. Oftentimes group homes, and you'll see as you have watched in your module, oftentimes groups homes can eliminate that autonomy, unfortunately, and that consent. So in a structured setting, and I also want us to think about our school settings, yes, we have structure, but to be cognizant that we may be taking consent away from students. Okay, so if we're saying this is what needs to be done by that, if we don't have a careful balance of authoritative approaches versus constructivist approaches, we may not be getting a lot of engagement out of our youngsters. So a day in the life of a person living in a group home will be told to get up at a certain time. Put this on, it's cold out. All right, what they should be wearing, what they should be eating for breakfast. You're going to have this whether you're hungry or not. This is what's on the menu. Hurry up, we're going to be late. All right, they have so much, like making sure that the temperature is regulated at a certain time, and we don't have control over that. Having a decision on where to go, what to do, what activities. And then ultimately, this may make someone feel deflated. Maybe start thinking that their opinion would never count. So it's just lessening them as a human, lessening them as a person with dignity. And in good faith, those who are caring for people with disabilities may not even be aware or not intentionally doing this. But all dependent on needs of individuals and the capacity to make decisions. We have to be mindful of this. So we may be thinking, well, what if someone can't verbalize through words? We would be looking for expressions, smiling, noises, eye contact, body motions. When I had an experience last summer volunteering at a home, that helped. It was a day program and a residential community for adults with intellectual disabilities and Down syndrome, and this was often a way to communicate with most of them, helping them with different crafting, and if knowing that they liked it or not liked it, this is what we needed to be cued in to. And then being very mindful of, okay, let's ask questions every step of the way. What do you like? What do you not like? Would you like bacon and eggs for breakfast? What would you, do you want to get dressed now? And as we learn as educators, giving maybe structure choices at times, even with younger kids, we know that this is a helpful strategy, making them feel empowered, helping them feel empowered, I should say. We all want that sense. We all want ownership. We all want that agency. But then we do have those times. What happens when someone says no and I like this? Will the earth stop spinning? No, if they say no. So if not, let them say no. Okay, it's to not take it personally, but know that they want their own. We want our own decisions and make our own decisions. Excuse me. Now, if you're looking ahead and you know that it may not be boasting a positive outcome for a person, help the person to understand why you think they should reconsider. So language such as, you don't want to go to work today. Isn't today the day you are going to volunteer at Meals on Wheels? I thought you enjoyed that. Or, I know you don't feel like going to work right now, but you did sign that agreement saying you would go as long as you aren't ill. So language that's fostering more of a positive. Oftentimes, no means no, and we want to make sure that consent is important in all facets of our life, not just when we're dealing with sexual contacts. We often look at that, and we hear consent in that context. But saying yes or saying no comes with consequences, and no one is exempt from the consequences. Everyone is on the learning curve of life, and our job is to help others who are newer at it than we are. So providing choices, but with guidance. That's what I would surmise from that. And if you truly respect others, then that culture of consent will be easier to implement and really cultivate a climate of dignity. So when we are engaged with and fully in tune with cultures of consent and dignity, we can expect that we're providing fully person-centered services. Staff interactions are enhanced by being more collegial and not controlling. Relationships between staff and the people they support will be more cooperative, and we're hoping that problem behaviors decrease and goal attainment increases. So this isn't new information, but it's just reframed in a different light as it pertains to a more of young adults transitioning into community settings and workforce settings. All these strategies are profitable and have positive outcomes for most of us, most children along the continuum. Okay, so spoke a lot about the ARC scale as a helpful tool to determine the degree of self-determination and how we can plan for the next steps. We highlighted the culture of consent, and your asynchronous work this week is listed with a culture of consent, community living providers, and the men of Adalissa. All right, I think you'll really find that documentary captivating. All right, I look forward to seeing you next time, and I hope you had an amazing week, and see you soon. Thank you.